She blinked, the ponytail swayed, the pink harem costume shimmered, and just like that, millions of living rooms across America were never quite the same again. I Dream of Jeannie was not simply a television comedy about a genie and an astronaut stumbling through the absurdities of wish fulfillment. It was something rarer and more lasting than that. It was pure, uncomplicated joy, bottled in a pink bottle and placed on a shelf in 1965. But 60 years have now passed since that bottle was first uncorked. And the question that lingers, soft and a little bittersweet, is this: where did the magic go, and where did the people who made it go with it? Hi, my name is Edward, and this is Screen Legends. Barbara Eden, Jeannie.
At the risk of hurting your feelings, I thought you were on a diet.
Barbara Eden was 34 years old when she first blinked her way into television history as Jeannie, a 2,000-year-old genie with the emotional range and romantic optimism of someone who had only just discovered what love felt like for the very first time. Which, to be fair, she essentially had. Jeannie was not simply a comedic device built around magic tricks and misunderstandings, though the show certainly gave her plenty of both. She was deeply, almost stubbornly devoted to the man she called Master, a title that made network executives nervous and feminists uncomfortable, and which Barbara Eden herself always addressed with a knowing smile and a quiet dignity that suggested she understood exactly what she was doing. Jeannie was powerful. She just chose, most of the time, to express that power through love rather than dominance. That distinction mattered enormously, and it is part of why the character has outlasted decades of television history that should, by all rights, have buried her. Barbara Eden brought something to the role that no casting director could have predicted or manufactured. She was warm without being saccharine. She was funny without being foolish. And she was beautiful in that particular way that somehow never made other women feel threatened, which is a far rarer quality in Hollywood than talent itself. The chemistry she shared with Larry Hagman was built on genuine mutual affection and a shared instinct for physical comedy that made even the most improbable plots feel completely natural. Her personal life carried real weight behind the laughter. The loss of her only son, Matthew Ansara, to a drug overdose in 2001, was a grief she carried with extraordinary public grace and private devastation. She has spoken openly about it in the years since, with the kind of honesty that commands deep respect. Today, Barbara Eden is 94 years old. Let that number settle for a moment. 94. She remains, by every account, sharp, warm, and genuinely beloved. She has continued making public appearances well into her 90s, always greeted with a kind of standing ovation that is less about celebrity and more about love. Her net worth is estimated at around $8 million, built across more than 7 decades of consistent, joyful, deeply committed work in the industry. If there is one word for Barbara Eden in 2026, it is this: magnificent. Larry Hagman, Major Anthony Nelson.
Oh, good.
Larry Hagman was 34 years old when he took on the role of Major Anthony Nelson, the NASA astronaut who discovers a genie on a deserted island, and then spends 5 seasons desperately trying to keep her a secret from literally everyone around him. Which, if you think about it, is an absolutely exhausting way to live. Tony Nelson was charming, well-meaning, frequently flustered, and completely incapable of simply saying, "Yes, I found a genie, and she lives with me, and honestly, it is mostly wonderful." That particular brand of lovable self-sabotage was Hagman's specialty, and he played it with an effortless ease that made viewers root for Tony, even when he was being spectacularly unreasonable. What is remarkable about Larry Hagman's contribution to I Dream of Jeannie is how much genuine warmth and comedic intelligence he brought to a role that could have easily become one-dimensional. Tony Nelson was the straight man, yes, but Hagman found moments of real vulnerability and humor in almost every episode, grounding the show's more fantastical elements with a deeply human relatability. The dynamic between him and Barbara Eden was not simply good chemistry. It was the kind of on-screen partnership that genuinely cannot be manufactured or replicated. Of course, for many viewers who came of age in the 1980s, Larry Hagman is equally, if not more, defined by a single question asked by an entire planet. Who shot J.R.? His portrayal of the magnificently villainous J.R. Ewing on Dallas which ran from 1978 to 1991, transformed him from beloved sitcom star into full-blown television icon. He was nominated for Golden Globe Awards for that role, and he won the affection of audiences worldwide who thrilled to watch him be absolutely terrible in the most entertaining way imaginable. He was, by all accounts, enormously proud of both roles and saw no contradiction between them. The charming astronaut and the scheming oil baron both lived inside the same man, and both were completely convincing. Larry Hagman was also refreshingly open about the personal challenges he faced across his life, including decades of heavy drinking that ultimately contributed to serious liver damage. He received a liver transplant in 1995 and spoke candidly about that experience, using it to advocate for organ donation with a generosity of spirit that said a great deal about who he was beyond the cameras. He battled throat cancer in his final years with the same stubborn determination that seemed to define him personally as much as professionally. Larry Hagman passed away on November 23, 2012, at the age of 81, surrounded by family. The world of television lost something irreplaceable that day. A man who could make you laugh and make you boo and make you feel deeply, sometimes all within the same scene. His legacy across both A Dream of Jeannie and Dallas represents a body of work that very few actors in the history of American television can match for sheer cultural impact. He is missed enormously, and if he were here, he would probably find a way to make even that statement funny. Bill Daly, Major Roger Healy.
I never milked a refrigerator.
Bill Daly was 33 years old when he stepped into the role of Major Roger Healy, Tony Nelson's best friend, fellow astronaut, and the only other person in the world who actually knew that Jeannie existed, which made Roger, when you stop to think about it, the most important supporting character in the entire show. Without Roger, Tony had no one to confide in, no one to panic with, and no one to share the particular strain of joyful chaos that came with having a 2,000-year-old Jeannie living in your spare bedroom. Bill Daly played Roger Healy as a man perpetually one surprise away from a complete nervous breakdown, and it was absolutely perfect. Where Tony Nelson was flustered, Roger was genuinely terrified. Where Tony tried to maintain dignity, Roger abandoned it almost immediately in favor of wide-eyed disbelief and spectacular overreaction. And yet, beneath all of that beautifully calibrated comic anxiety, Daly brought a warmth and a genuine sweetness to Roger that made him feel like someone you would actually want in your corner, even if he would absolutely inevitably accidentally say the wrong thing at the worst possible moment. Following I Dream of Jeannie, Bill Daly continued working steadily in television comedy, most notably as Howard Borden on The Bob Newhart Show, which ran from 1972 to 1978. That role cemented his reputation as one of the finest comic supporting actors of his generation. He had an instinct for the kind of gentle, self-deprecating humor that never punched down and never wore out its welcome, a rare and deeply valuable gift. In his later years, Bill Daly lived quietly, largely away from the entertainment industry in Albuquerque, New Mexico. He was remembered by those who knew him as genuinely funny, genuinely kind, and completely devoid of the kind of ego that Hollywood so often manufactures in its performers. Bill Daly passed away on September 8, 2022, at the age of 91. 91 years. That is a life well and fully lived. And if you watch any episode of I Dream of Jeannie today and find yourself smiling before Roger Healy has even finished his sentence, that is Bill Daly's gift to you, still working perfectly, decades after it was first given. Hayden Rourke, Dr. Alfred Bellows. Hayden Rourke was 53 years old when he took on the role of Dr. Alfred Bellows, the NASA psychiatrist assigned to evaluate Tony Nelson, and who subsequently spent 5 full seasons in a state of mounting, beautifully calibrated professional torment. Dr. Bellows knew. He did not know what he knew exactly or how to prove it, or what he would even say if someone asked him to put it into a formal report. But he knew. Something was wrong. Something was deeply, fundamentally, inexplicably wrong with Major Anthony Nelson, and the fact that he could never quite assemble the available evidence into a coherent conclusion was, for the audience watching at home, one of the purest and most consistent sources of comedic joy the show ever produced. Dr. Bellows was, in every meaningful sense, the perfect comic foil, A man of science and reason and professional credentials, perpetually undone by circumstances that refused to cooperate with any of those things. He arrived at each new episode armed with logic and psychiatric training and an absolutely unshakable belief that the world operated according to knowable, documentable rules. And the world, specifically the small, chaotic corner of it occupied by Tony Nelson and Jeannie, proved him spectacularly wrong every single time, without fail, without mercy, with what sometimes felt like a personal and targeted enthusiasm. What elevated Hayden Rourke's performance above simple comic mechanics was the extraordinary dry dignity he brought to every moment of Dr. Bellows' exasperation. His frustration was never broad or cartoonish. It was precise, controlled. The frustration of a deeply intelligent man who cannot understand why his intelligence keeps failing him. His suspicion was always calibrated to sit just one careful step behind the truth, close enough to feel the heat of it, never quite close enough to grasp it, and his absolute, almost heroic refusal to accept what was directly in front of him was somehow both completely maddening and completely recognizably human. Most of us, if we are genuinely honest with ourselves, would have reacted in exactly the same way. Before I Dream of Jeannie, Rourke had spent decades building a serious and versatile career across film and television, demonstrating a range that extended well beyond comedy into drama, character work, and stage performance. He was a trained and deeply disciplined actor who brought genuine craft to every role he accepted, regardless of the scale or the genre. Hayden Rourke passed away in August of 1987 at the age of 77. He left behind 4 decades of committed, skillful work and one character who remains, for everyone who ever loved this show, entirely and permanently irreplaceable. There will never be another Dr. Bellows. And somehow, that feels exactly right. Emmeline Henry. Amanda Bellows. Emmeline Henry was 38 years old when she took on the recurring role of Amanda Bellows, the socially ambitious and wonderfully self-possessed wife of Dr. Alfred Bellows. Amanda was not a character who demanded enormous amounts of screen time to leave a lasting impression. She simply arrived, assessed the room, with the quiet certainty of someone who had long ago concluded she was the most capable person in it, and proceeded accordingly. And honestly, she was usually right, which made watching her an absolute pleasure. What Emmeline Henry understood instinctively about Amanda was that the character worked best as a perfect counterweight to her husband's perpetual exasperation. Where Dr. Bellows was always one unexplained incident away from filing a formal psychological report, Amanda moved through the same chaos with an almost serene composure, as though the universe's strange behavior around Tony Nelson was simply another social inconvenience to be navigated with grace. Together, the Bellows couple became one of the show's most genuinely warm and reliable comic pairings. A marriage that felt real, lived in, and quietly hilarious in the best possible way. Before I Dream of Jeannie, Henry had built a steady career across television and stage, bringing that same light, assured touch to everything she touched. She was the kind of actress whose name you might not immediately recall, but whose face, the moment it appeared on screen, produced an immediate and involuntary smile. Emmeline Henry passed away on October 25, 1979, at the age of 57. Far too young, far too soon. Her contribution to the Dream of Jeannie is one of those quiet, essential threads that the show's warmth depended on far more than casual viewers ever quite realized. Some performances hold a room together simply by being exactly right. Hers was one of them. Barton McLean. General Martin Peterson.
Well, you can type that.
They are typed.
Barton McLean was 63 years old when he took on the role of General Martin Peterson, the commanding officer overseeing Tony Nelson's NASA career in the first 2 seasons of I Dream of Jeannie. General Peterson was the kind of authority figure that 1960s television did so well. Gruff, decisive, operating entirely on the assumption that the world made logical sense, and therefore perpetually blindsided by the particular flavor of chaos that followed Tony Nelson everywhere he went. What is worth appreciating about Barton McLean is the sheer scope of the career he brought with him to that role. By the time he appeared on I Dream of Jeannie, he had already accumulated well over 100 film credits, stretching back to the early 1930s. He was a Hollywood veteran in the truest sense of the word, a man who had worked alongside legends, survived the transition from one era of filmmaking to another, and arrived on an NBC comedy soundstage in the mid-1960s with the kind of quiet professional authority that only genuine experience produces. Barton McLean passed away on January 1st, 1969, at the age of 66, just 2 years after his time on A Dream of Jeannie had concluded. He left behind a body of work of extraordinary breadth and a presence in the show's early seasons that gave the comedy a sturdy, grounded foundation it genuinely needed. Vinton Hayworth. On its General Winfield.
No, I want that cup for our own display case.
Vinton Hayworth was 59 years old when he stepped into the role of General Winfield Schaefer, taking over as Tony Nelson's commanding officer following the departure of General Peterson. And if you were a devoted viewer making that transition alongside the show, you'd likely notice something subtly different about this particular general. Not dramatically different, not the kind of difference that announces itself loudly or demands acknowledgement, but the kind of quiet, almost imperceptible shift in atmosphere that you feel before you can fully articulate it, like a change in the weather that your bones register before your eyes do. Where General Peterson had operated with the firm, unyielding authority of a man who believed the world ran on discipline and logic, and would continue to do so provided everyone simply followed the correct procedures, Schaefer carried just a slightly softer edge. Still completely committed to military order and proper protocol. Still absolutely spectacularly blindsided every single time something inexplicable unfolded in Tony Nelson's immediate vicinity, which, as any regular viewer understood, was essentially always. But there was a quality of bewildered tolerance about Schaefer that his predecessor never quite possessed, a sense that somewhere, deep beneath the uniform and the rank and the carefully maintained composure, this particular general had quietly made a private peace with the fact that some things simply could not be explained. He had stopped asking why. He had started hoping for the best, and, honestly, given what Tony Nelson put his commanding officers through on a weekly basis, that represents a reasonable and arguably healthy psychological adjustment. Vinton Hayworth arrived on the all-eye Dream of Jeannie, set carrying decades of professional experience behind him. The kind of accumulated craft and quiet confidence that cannot be taught in any classroom or acting workshop, and cannot be faked on any soundstage. He had built his career steadily and entirely without fanfare across film and television throughout the 1940s and 1950s, navigating the enormous transitions of that era in Hollywood with the calm adaptability of someone who understood that the work itself was always the point, never the celebrity, never the attention, always the work. He was, in the most genuine and admirable sense of the phrase, a working actor, the kind of performer whose reliability and quiet craft made him genuinely indispensable to every production lucky enough to have him on the call sheet. He was not the kind of man who sought the spotlight or engineered his own mythology. He was the kind who simply showed up, prepared and present, did the work with complete professionalism, and let the material speak for itself. Hollywood has always needed far more of those. It has never had quite enough of them. Vinton Hayworth passed away on May 21st, 1970, at the age of 66, just as the final season of I Dream of Jeannie was drawing quietly to a close. There is something genuinely melancholy about that particular timing, the show ending, the cast beginning to scatter in the way that all television families eventually must, and another gentle, talented, deeply professional presence slipping away just as the curtain was finally coming down. He deserved a longer run. He deserved more recognition than he ever received. But perhaps the truest measure of a performer like Vinton Hayworth is not the attention they gathered during their lifetime. It is the quiet, persistent way their work continues to hold up decades after they are gone. Watch any episode featuring General Schaefer today, and you will see exactly what I mean. A moment with the show itself. I want to pause here for just a moment, because I think it is worth saying something about what I Dream of Jeannie actually was, beyond the plot descriptions and the cast biographies and the dates of birth and passing that we have been walking through together. I Dream of Jeannie was made during one of the most turbulent decades in American history. The country was navigating the Vietnam War, the civil rights movement, the genuine existential anxiety of the space race and Cold War tensions that made the future feel both thrilling and deeply uncertain. And yet, twice a week, Americans sat down in front of their televisions and watched a man try to hide a genie from his commanding officer. And they laughed. They genuinely, completely, gratefully laughed. There is something profound in that. Not escapism in the dismissive sense of the word, but the kind of joy that reminds people, in the middle of real darkness, that lightness is still possible, that warmth is still available, that a pink bottle on a shelf in Cocoa Beach, Florida, could, for 30 minutes at a time, make the whole complicated world feel a little more manageable. The people who created that feeling deserve to be remembered not just as names in a credit sequence, but as contributors to something genuinely meaningful. And that is exactly what we are doing here on Screen Legends. Hello, everyone. We have come to the end of our journey through the cast of I Dream of Jeannie, and I hope you will stay with me for just one more moment before we close. Of the principal cast members who brought that show to life across 5 unforgettable seasons, most have now passed on. Barton McLean left us in 1969, Vinton Hayworth in 1970, Emmeline Henry in 1979, Hayden Rourke in 1987, Bill Daly in 2022, Larry Hagman in 2012. Each of them took something irreplaceable with them, a particular laugh, a perfectly timed pause, a look delivered directly to camera that said, without words, can you believe this is actually happening? And yet, at 94 years old, Barbara Eden remains. Still warm, or still gracious, still, when the moment calls for it, capable of that particular smile that made 60 years disappear in an instant. She is, in every meaningful sense, the keeper of the flame, the living embodiment of everything I dream of, Jeannie represented at its very best. 60 years is a long time, long enough for the world to change completely, for entire generations to rise and pass, for the television landscape to transform so thoroughly that a gentle NBC comedy about a genie and an astronaut feels almost impossibly distant. And yet, blink once, and there she is, still in that pink costume, still saying master with that particular mixture of devotion and mischief that always suggested she knew exactly who was really in charge. Some magic, it turns out, does not require a bottle. It just requires the right people, the right story, and 60 years of audiences who never quite stopped believing. Thank you for watching Screen Legends. If the stories and memories we explored today touched you in any way, please follow the channel and join us for more journeys through the lives behind the lights of the screen. I am Edward, and I will see you in the next one.